A Light in the Darkness Chapter 51, Fan Fiction by Azazyel. The battle between the human Darian and the Aeldari, Ayra, began with the clashing of Ayra's warp sorcery-covered sword against the blade of Darian's blessed spear that would violently disturb warp sorcery to make it blow up in the face of whoever was using it. For demons, when they got stabbed by that spear, their flesh would literally boil when it came into contact with the spear, but when the warp lightning that coated Ayra's sword clashed with the spear, she screamed as lightning exploded everywhere, shocking the shit out of her as her connection to the warp went wild, and she reflexively added more power to it, causing her to be further shocked as Darian just gritted his teeth through the pain. Oh dear tisk. Ellesmere sked with disappointment as I was proven wrong about Darian's spearmanship, as instead of disengaging their weapon lock to continue their duel, the young man pressed on with one hand holding the spear against her blade, and a loud cracking noise rang out as Darian stomped forward. He used his beyond-human body-refining strength to punch the haughty space elf right in the face with her thin and regal nose, audibly snapping with blood gushing out as her body was forced to do a double backflip from the great force of the punch to her face. I couldn't help but facepalm as I expected to see a just and beautiful duel with their weapons. But Darian cold-clocking the elf and breaking her nose was literally the last thing I expected to see. So who do you think will win, Jake? Ellesmere said as she affectionately leaned against my shoulder as she watched the battle with me, and I snorted at the question. Despite Darian stepping onto the path of cultivation and having taken some demon core pills to enhance his body and spiritual might, he was still far behind in aspects, and most importantly, pure combat experience against Ayra. Ayra, of course. I said dryly, and Ellesmere kissed my cheek as she haughtily giggled and went back to watching the back. But as Ayra got back to her feet and realized that she couldn't coat her sword in sorcery lest it blows up in her face, she was able to meet Darian equally on the field we set aside for their duel. Though Ayra clearly was more skilled, agile, and dexterous out of the two of them. But Darian was faster and stronger with his cultivator body, and combined with his spear, that gave him more range, he was able to keep Ayra on the back foot for a good while. But Ayra, once she realized she couldn't use sorcery, she began dancing around the spears, thrusts, and swiping cuts, before she cleanly danced around Darian's spear, and with one overextension when he tried to kick the agile elf away as she closed in. She showed that she was rather petty in how she stomped on the human's leg to launch herself into the air, and then she rammed her knees into Darian's own nose and face, creating a loud cracking noise as his own nose broke. Then as Ayra came down out of the air and Darian stepped back as his eyes reflexively clouded over at the broken nose, Arya's legs landed on Darian's shoulders, but the elf was tilted downwards, and with the downward momentum of the elf boosted with some telekinesis, Darian was thrown to the ground with the elf flipping in the air to land on her feet and bring her sword down to rest on Darian's chest while she lightly panted at the extortion of flipping the overly strong human. You fought well, Amo. You fought well, human. You are about half as physically strong as an Astarte. So keep up your training as I desire to face you at your full potential as my vice leader. Ayra said proudly as she took the leading role in the disciples' little coming expedition, while Ellesmere sent me a smug look at her fellow Aeldar winning the duel. I just rolled my eyes at how Ellesmere was being so petty. It's not like Ayra wasn't a dozen times older than Darian was. With the Aeldar probably spending longer than his entire lifetime in actual battle. Either way, I clapped my hands as I looked at Ayra and Darian, who were fixing their nose now that the battle was over. That was a fine battle. Darian, you did well against an opponent with many more years of experience, but that's no excuse for your loss, as 90% of all beings you will face are far older and experienced than you, so get over it and get better than they are. I said bluntly before I looked at Ayra. Ayra, I cannot fault your technique due to you not having won at all, seeing as you have only been within the sect for a week. But even after knowing clearly that the sect arts disturb warp sorcery and the knowledge of his style of the spear being public and even one of the cheapest spears in the sect store, you still were surprised and careless, allowing him a potentially lethal blow if he had a fist martial art. Read up on the sect's abilities, or the next time you get surprised and almost defeated by common knowledge, you will sit in front of the cafeteria for a day with a sign stating, I used spiritual energy to make a sign that said, I don't read books and got beaten up by someone with common knowledge. I didn't believe in physical punishment, with training and such as cultivation required a certain mindset. And punishing someone with training only made them half-ass the training, and that could lead to bad habits or even people fucking up the cultivation of the technique and possibly killing themselves. At the sign's words, everyone, including humans and Aeldari, looked at the sign with shame clear on their faces, and I saw everyone mentally swearing to go read the books of the sect and find the more relevant info. Arya, you are in charge of the disciples. I will be following and keeping stronger Trianids and other lifeforms I don't believe you guys can deal with yet. But use the storage bags I have given you to store the remains of the Trianids and demons as we go to the site where the Hive Tyrant and the greater demons died. I explained, and all the disciples nodded as I led them out of the square and towards the edge of the sect's wards.